So I just want to begin by thanking the bar. I know the role the Bar Association has played throughout our legal community in Alaska. As Linda mentioned, I had served as Attorney General of our great state, but particularly with regard to the issue of promoting pro bono legal services and public service. And that's an issue that I'm very passionate about, have been focused on in my 2 years in the U.S. Senate, and I want to talk to you a little bit about today. And that's where I want to also mention the great work that the Legal Services Corporation does. We all know it's a cornerstone of civil legal aid for low-income Americans throughout the country and provides important, really critical resources for equal access to justice for so many of our citizens. I wanted to give you kind of an update of some of the work that I was honored to do with our Alaska Legal Services Corporation. That organization enables approximately 6,400 low-income Alaskans from across the state to address critical legal services needs, covering a whole host of issues. And in particular, for states like Alaska that don't have law school, so there's no legal aid clinics from law schools that they can offer legal services, Alaska Legal Services plays a critical role. So I had the experience as Attorney General, and even to this day continue to work closely with our Alaska Legal Services organization. And it's something that I wanted to talk about just briefly here today because it's an idea that I'm trying to actually take that we did in Alaska and want to try and take nationally. And it involves a really important but distressing issue in my state and across the country. Here's what it is. Alaska is home to many great things, big things, wonderful things. We very proud of our state. One thing we're not proud of, though, is that we have the highest rates of domestic violence, the highest rates of sexual assault in the country. You look at these categories, horrible categories, rape, child abuse, and unfortunately, my state ranks in the top on these horrifying statistics, which, as you know, they're not just statistics, they're people and they're human lives. So when I was Attorney General, I worked very closely with our governor and Alaska Legal Services, and we launched a statewide initiative that's still going on today in the state. It was called the Choose Respect campaign. And it was a very multifaceted campaign. It had a, tough component. We cranked up the penalties for perpetrators of, horrendous crimes like rape and many other things. But one of the things that we really focused on was legal services. And other services for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. And I organized with Alaska Legal Services what we called pro bono legal summits throughout the state. And the idea was we were going out to members of the bar, some who had practiced, some who were active, some who maybe were in other fields, and we explained to them the problem. And we actually explained to them one of the very well-known solutions. So if you look nationwide at any study that shows, hey, what is one of the most important ways we can bring down these levels of horrible crimes, let's face it, that don't only exist in Alaska, but exist all across the country. And one of the best ways to do that, studies show time and time again, is to get the victims of these crimes an attorney. It's not the panacea, but it's as close as a panacea as you get to breaking the cycle of violence. And that's a fact. There's another fact, though, that victims don't have that advocacy. So in one day, in 2014, the National Network to End Domestic Violence estimated that in just one day, in the fall of 2014, 12,000 requests for services, particularly legal services, for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault were unmet in the country. One day, 12,000. So clearly, there's a need for more representation And when I talk about this, I always say, think about this, again, fact. If you're a rapist or a perpetrator, you get a Sixth Amendment right to counsel. Okay? That's fine. That's the Bill of Rights. If you're a victim, you get nothing. Okay? I just think that's wrong. I think that's wrong. And so last year... So last year, along with Senator Heidi Heitkamp, she and I introduced the Pro Bono Work to Empower and Represent Act. That's called the POWER Act for short. And what this does is it tries to kind of take what we did in Alaska to the national level, and it gets the Justice Department involved, not in a big way, very simple way, where each U.S. attorney, just once a year, each U.S. attorney in the United States holds an event that promotes pro bono legal services for victims of domestic violence. Simple. Not a big deal. It passed unanimously in the United States Senate. Unfortunately, came over here and got stalled. But we have very, very strong bipartisan leadership in the House on this bill, the POWER Act. I want you to remember the POWER Act. Talk to your congressmen and representatives, particularly members of the House Judiciary Committee. I won't say anything more about that. But here's the vision, right? Here's the vision with this. An army of thousands of lawyers across the country, driven by the Bar Association, driven by Legal Services Corporation, driven by the Justice Department, to help represent these victims who need the help. By the way, it won't cost the federal government a dime. With the ABA, Legal Services Corporation, an army of lawyers across the nation doing what, like I said, studies after studies show is the best way to break the cycle of violence that nobody in America, certainly nobody in Alaska, should look the other way on. And that's the fact that there's too much domestic violence and sexual assault. As a father of 3 teenage daughters and a husband to an incredible, remarkable wife, what I always tell my colleagues over on the Senate side is, a lot of times these issues are viewed as kind of women's issues, not to be partisan, but kind of democratic women's issues, and they shouldn't be, right? They shouldn't be. The men are the ones doing the crimes. So these should be this should be an issue for men and women. So I want to work with all of you on this and appreciate the opportunity to say a few words. And as Linda mentioned, because of this experience, I'm a big believer and supporter of the important role that the Legal Services Corporation plays for the country. So thank you very much.